Welcome back, Tiger fans, to Rockin' Radio's football podcast. I'm Nate Edwards. That's Nathan Hurst. This is Before the Box Score, post-Arkansas edition, and breaking news edition, too. This is always fun when we get to break news on a Sunday night. Nathan Hurst, how are you doing?
Doing good. Doing even better with exciting recruiting news. We're back on the recruiting trail, and especially following a victory over the Frozen Hogs.
That's right. Canadian bacon is what we're going to call that. But yeah, let's get to it. I mean, literally 28 minutes before we hit play. Merry Flipmas, everybody, to you and yours. Missouri flipped a commitment from Kentucky, those dirty Wildcats to the east. They just finished up one of the worst seasons that they've had under Mark Stoops, not counting the first one. And of course, when you have something like that happen, you tend to have some recruits looking around for other things. And Missouri just flipped a commit from Kentucky to Missouri. His name is Marquise Davis. He is a consensus 4-star running back. He is from Cleveland, Ohio. He does have an offer list from everybody, including Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Alabama, Notre Dame, Penn State, anybody that you can think of. And he did apparently flip to Missouri. Hurst, how cool is this?
It's awesome. I enjoy taking 4-star running backs away from, well, of course, from SEC teams who already had them, but also when he had plenty of other options, many closer to home, such as Ohio State. In-state looked like they wanted this guy, and as well as Penn State, Michigan. So always nice to beat those guys out for running back. And in a quick little perusal of his highlights, this dude can fly very fast, and not only fast but bigger than really anyone on the roster in terms of his height. 6 foot, 210 pounds. Jamal Roberts maybe is kind of might be the only one that's close to his size that's currently on the roster. But long strider, and he can move those legs really fast. He runs away from the competition and it's not small town, rural, small high school competition. This is Ohio high school football, which is a higher level of high school football as high school football goes. So I think this kid is talented. He has the build to be a SEC running back. So it's exciting. Now, is he going to play day one when he gets here on campus next year? Probably not. But why not? Why couldn't he? We'll see. There's a lot of competition there. A few other questions. We already have Jamarian Morrow committed, another 4-star in his own right from Memphis area. What does this mean for his commitment? Hopefully nothing. Hopefully he's staying as well, or coming signing next week or this week as Wednesday. Well.
Yeah.
That we're rapidly approaching that early signing date. So hopefully, you can never have too many running backs. It's nice to have a nice healthy stable there. So very big get, not only for his talent, but for who they competed with, went up toe-to-toe with it and beat out for his services.
Yeah. Again, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Penn State. Those are the teams that he has visited like multiple times, especially with Ohio State and Penn State. I'm watching his film right now. It is just a series of being faster than the other guys. Well, here's one. Okay. So he breaks a couple tackles here, some terrible arm tackles. This one he's going up for a pass and high points it and then absorbs contact. That's pretty cool. Yeah, you can go on this. His huddle is open to the public. I will say this. 6 foot 208 or 210 or 205, whatever service you're subscribing to. It varies a little bit. But the rule always goes subtract 2 inches from the height, subtract about 10 inches from the weight. So he's probably more 5'10", 200, 5'10", 198, which is more in line of what you see from a Kwan Lacey, from a Marcus Carroll, something like that. But yeah, I mean, this is great. This is great. And I hope Jamarian Morrow signs too, because as we learned, you need in the Eli Drinkwitz offense, the Kirby Moore offense, you need multiple running backs. It works really well that way, and it really helps if they have different skill sets. Obviously, Cody Schrader was able to do it by himself because he's just a 101. But if your fast, speedy guy can't cut it, let's bring in your bruiser and see what happens, and vice versa. So it's nice to have a lot of versatility and a lot of options, and a lot of blue chip 4-star options is nice in the backfield. That takes us to 4 because you have DeForest Jones still. You say you have Quan Lacey, who has seen the field, and then now you have Jermaine Morrow, who needs to sign on the dotted line, as well as Mr. Davis here. So that's pretty great, on top of anything else that you get through the transfer portal and or just from the existing class. So Jamal Roberts is the lone 3-star, and he's probably the best returning guy, which is pretty nice. So yeah, this is cool. Happy Flipmas. Now he can go both ways. Maybe this means Marl signs somewhere else. Maybe this means that somebody else is leaving and they had the spot for a high schooler, so they took it. Like the other shoe can drop. It can drop. I'm not saying it will, just saying that it can. But yeah, enjoy the wins when you get them, especially over SEC foes, because, boy, when's the last time Missouri stole a running back from Kentucky? I can't imagine ever, right?
You're right. I mean, if anything, Kentucky's flipped a couple of commitments from us, not necessarily running backs, but it's gone the other way. In my memory, I couldn't name any specific names, but it feels like that's happened more often than the other way around. So nice to benefit from a 9-3 season while they're floundering, and I think they finished 4-8, 5-7, something unbowl worthy at the very least.
Now, when you mentioned that record, it is 9-3. Believe it or not, Missouri did win a game against Arkansas. I would put that game as watchability at a 5, 6. There's a novelty aspect that it was a snow game, the first one since 1998. There's a little bit of increased stigma just because it is an official rival in Arkansas. And of course, it's always nice to win. But Hurst, man, it feels like that was a B- effort with an A+ outcome. How did you feel about the game overall?
It was the novelty was great. I was there at the game. It was very cold. It actually wasn't as cold as I feared that it would be. Okay. There was pretty much no wind, so you can't blame any of the passing woes on any kind of wind, which you often get with these type of cold games. No wind at all. It was cold. I mean, it was 27, 28 degrees. I'm sure it was colder on the field. You're falling on ice all the time because by the second quarter, that snow was very much chunks of ice. But yeah, it was, the novelty was there. It was kind of fun until the third quarter. They're like, okay, well, now it's just kind of messed up. The stepbrothers mean the tuxedos just kind of seem kind of messed up. It was fun for a while, then it wore off. I have a lot of problems with the game plan on both sides of the field, both sides of the field for Mizzou. But it kind of all comes back to what we always talk about. It was the most Mizzou of games in terms of the game plan, in terms of the outcome, in terms of how the game script went. And I would say I'd blame that more than any of the conditions in terms of what made it a slog of a game to watch. Thankfully, it ended with the good guys pulling it out. But it was not a great watch in the third. I'll say the third quarter was not a great watch.
It was rough all around. You could point to the snow as leading to inefficiency, but then your opponent goes 21 of 35 for 229 yards. So, that's not really part of it. You could say, well, it's kind of slipping around and made offensive linemen, kind of made it tougher to move and hit your blocks. And, Arkansas had a 71% success rate running the ball, like their quarterback had a 90% success rate running the ball. So it's just, Arkansas is a good team. And it was coming in, it was a pretty even matchup. Missouri and Arkansas were very close to each other in SP+, both overall, offense, defense. Obviously the record's different, but these were very similar teams who wanted to do very similar things. It's just that Arkansas' strength was the run defense and their weakness was the pass defense. And Missouri really was not able to capitalize on that frequently. And then on the flip side, Arkansas was able to pretty much move the ball as they saw fit, thanks to a mobile quarterback and their running back who had himself an incredible day. But yeah, at the end of the day, success rates don't matter. It's how many times did you score? And Missouri was timely enough in their successful plays to get the win, and timely enough in their defensive efforts to get the win. But it's not that they seemed disinterested or lackluster. It wasn't good. And I don't know really what to point to other than just execution. I don't know.
And it was certainly, so in my opinion, this is what it felt like to me it was obvious to me middle of the second quarter, and it carried over into the second half, and at least until the fourth quarter when the offense kind of changed their gear. We'll call it mid third quarter. They changed their tact a little bit, but it looked to me like Mizzou on both sides of the ball, their game plan coming in was they were scared of the conditions. They were terrified that the icy, the snowy, the cold was going to do something that was going to screw them up and or screw the other team up. And so they played so mega conservatively on both sides of the ball, saying we can't mess this up. We have to wait, sit there and wait and let them screw it up. Let them do all the screwing up. We'll let them do that, and then we'll win. Now, that's often kind of their default anyway, is play conservatively. But especially on the defensive side of the ball, the amount of 10-yard cushions that they were giving their receivers every single pass play the entire game, that was the biggest reason why, on top of a few really nice plays that Taylor Green made scrambling out of the pocket. The biggest reason Arkansas threw the ball as well as they did is their receivers had massive cushions the entire game, which, okay, maybe you do that to start, but when it's very clear that they can't throw the ball deep downfield either because the conditions were bad, start tightening it up a little bit. The one thing that the Mizzou defense did right this game is they gave up very few explosive plays or those really catastrophic 45-yard deep passes. And that was probably because the conditions did not allow for it. So they should have figured that out much sooner or ever. They didn't. That they're not going to get beat deep in these conditions. They can't. I think the longest air yards completion that they had was probably 20 yards downfield. You're not going to give up a 50-yard touchdown pass behind you. So play up a little bit. You can still have your safeties back there in case someone misses a tackle, but they didn't. And so Arkansas was just able to 8 to 12 yards every single time down the field, on top of the fact that then the run defense was very poor. And you could maybe argue that footing conditions contributed to that a little bit. But that was probably what frustrated me the most was the fact that they were perfectly content to let Arkansas go on 12 to 14 play drives all the way down the field, hoping they would screw up. And Arkansas did screw up. They did screw up. They had 2 fumbles. They had a lot of penalties. I don't think many of the penalties actually killed drives for them, especially the drive they had the most penalties. They ended up scoring a touchdown anyway. Arkansas did screw up, but they didn't screw up enough. Arkansas should have won this game based on how the defense was playing. Yeah. Thankfully, the offense bailed them out at the end, which they did against Oklahoma as well, and against South Carolina. They kind of figured it out, or finally took the reins off and let them start throwing the ball a little bit more. I'm not sure what changed there, but the defensive game plan should have lost them this game, and it very well could have if it played out in a different way.
Yeah, and Arkansas gives you opportunities. That's kind of their thing. Yep, 3. Let's see here. They had 3 fumbles on the day. They lost 2 of them. There were 4 fumbles total on the day. Missouri recovered 3, so that was a good day. The thing that surprised me was that Missouri was very havocy, but not in the way that you kind of think that they're going to be. Like they had 2 sacks. They had 4 tackles for loss. They had 10 passes defensed, whether with head and shoulders. Like they were active in swatting at the ball. And they got 0 interceptions out of it, which is absurd. You should pick off like every 3.6, I think is what it comes out. Like every 3.6 passes, you get an interception. Missouri had 10 and 0 interceptions. Like that's just bad luck. That's bad luck. But Taylor Green throws a very ugly ball. That's, pretty easy to get your hand on. And defensive line was active. Corners were active. And so there's a lot of disruption there, and it's not in the way that you usually think of it. But you think back to how Arkansas performed. There's 10 possessions each game, because that's just how Missouri games go. 10 possessions each side. Arkansas only had 5 scoring opportunities, so half the time they were in a position where they could score, and they only scored 21 points. It's 4.2. That's pretty good. When you get down to it, yeah, they moved the ball. Yeah, there was a lot of cushion. No, they did not really capitalize it. Now, 4.2 is good. That's about their season average, and they're a very good, scoring offense. But Missouri, again, shrunk the game down, gave them very little choice, opportunities, and they had one more than Arkansas did. Almost, Arkansas almost got it, but they had one more, and that was enough. And that's just kind of the story of the 2024 Missouri Tigers. Not pretty, but enough. And I don't know how it got to this point. Obviously, we can speculate. Maybe stories come out as we get into the off season and into bowl season, and once we're officially done. But it's disappointing wins, disappointing 9 wins. Just feels like you leaving things out there. Like it was enough. That's kind of the story.
It's the story of Mizzou the last 2 years for sure. They won. It's great. They won. It didn't have to be this way. They could have won this game much more easily, much more convincingly, if the offense was able to figure things out before it took 35 minutes to finally put something together. If they make different decisions at the end of the first half, like every week, if the defense is a little more aggressive and force Arkansas to actually try to go down the field, because I don't think that would have worked. They could have won this. They could have won this game by 14 to 17 points if they had done a few different things differently. They also could have lost this game easily if Arkansas doesn't put the ball on the ground 2 different times when they've crossed, or once, which set up the first touchdown, because Mizzou would not have scored in the first half had they not been given the ball on their own 40. And then once in the second half as well, I guess once again, across on their own side. So it could have gone very, very differently in either way. But it's a Mizzou game, so it ends up being close, and Mizzou scores enough points at the end to win it anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this way, Eli. It doesn't have to be this way. You can be good. You can be better than this. You can be better.
We've seen them do it. We've seen them do it last year. In the rain, they were throwing the ball around at Kentucky. I don't know. You play Ohio State one time, and all of a sudden you want to be this Big Ten North, just let's just wrestle in the mud, and I'm going to win on a technicality. I don't know. And I don't know how much of it is Kirby Moore and how much of it is Eli Drinkwitz. We're never going to know. But it just, for the first 3 years of Eli Drinkwitz's tenure, I called this offense just reductive hamburger. Just the most simple, blasé, smashy smash kind of offense that basically did nothing, hope for a few big breaks and big plays and let your defense win. And I thought we had gotten away with that once Luther Burden made the leap and Theo Weiss came into play and Brady Cook was a little bit older. We had a better offensive line. I was like, okay, hey, 2023. Yeah, we can win by more than one score. We can bury teams and win in the third quarter and not have to sweat out a fourth quarter. But here we are with basically the same offense and doing the same thing. So joke's on me, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to say that the lack of explosive plays is only because Luther Burden was doubled or only because Marquise Johnson was injured for half the year or any of that. I don't have good answers. And it's so bizarre that these same guys could come back and would turn into this. But here we are.
But 9-3 is 9-3. I mean, I would take 9-3 with this type of play over 6-6 with putting up 400 yards in the air every week. So
yeah,
all things are relative. I will take this 9-3 season is going to be a good year no matter what, any year for Mizzou. So this is a good year regardless of how they got there.
Yeah.
9-3 is 9-3 in the SEC in 2024 is 9-3 in the SEC in 2024.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not looking 9 wins in the mouth. I appreciate it for what it is. What I'm doing is I'm big brain long-term thinking and wondering, okay, are we back to our old problems? Was Kirby Moore not the fix? Was Cody Schrader literally the thing that made this engine go? Because you hate to see regression to old habits. Now, again, you win, and if that's going to keep going and we just have to deal with the heart palpitations every Saturday, then, so be it. You'd like to think it can be more. But, yeah, I mean, snow games are fun. They're novel. Missouri wins this one by 7 points. Another one-score win that we get to chalk up to Eli Drinkwitz's tenure at Missouri. And so Now we sit here 9-3, getting into signing day, getting into the actual offseason stuff. I mean, you're 9-3, you're eighth in the SEC. We don't know where they're going to play for a bowl, but you got 11 wins last year, 9 wins so far this year. How do you feel going forward? I know we just lambasted the offense for the past 5 minutes, but how do you feel about Missouri as a program sitting right now, December 1st, 2024, as we go forward?
As a program, I think they're in a good spot. I mean, it's the best spot that they've been in a decade in terms of what they've achieved already, what the prospects are moving forward based on recruiting success that has already occurred and that is occurring as we speak, as we were alluded to tonight. The program is in a good spot. Feel good about the state of the program, but Mizzou is still at a point, and will continue to be for at least a couple more. It'll take a few more years of this level of success, where one bad year, where with one maybe one missed recruiting class, where you just strike, you miss on some guys that aren't what you thought they were, or a quarterback that gets hurt for a significant amount of time and you have no viable backups, or and you have you're back down to 6-6, that could easily bring the program back down. So they're in a good spot now, but it's going to take multiple years of establishing this program as a 9 or 10 win team on a consistent basis to eventually kind of submit yourself to where you're in a place where that's the baseline is 8-9 wins, 9-10 wins even. We're at the 9-10 win plateau right now, but you can't really say that that's the baseline yet. And that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal for Mizzou, is to be a 9 or 10 win team as a baseline. And then, every few years you get to 11, 12 wins, or 11 wins, make a playoff. Maybe once every 5 years you only win 8 wins, and that's a down year. That's what you're shooting for right now. That down year isn't 8 wins. A down year is still back in 6 wins. So they're heading in the right direction. This is what they needed to do. They needed to have a follow-up good year, and they did. So that the boxes are getting checked, but there are still more boxes to check.
What does it take to be a good team in the 2020s with NIL, with the portal, with the house settlement, kind of looming in the near future? What does that mean? Because it used to be get good recruiting classes and all of that, what that entailed. And just keep, stocking as much talent as you can, and then winning as many games as you can and hoping to get lucky. That's kind of what it used to be. Now it's stockpiling talent through high school and the transfer portal, making sure that the guys that you need are compensated correctly as far as NIL goes, making sure that you hold on to your roster. You don't, anybody that you lose or you're not really looking to count on as far as contributing the following year. Constantly bringing in linemen, both offensive and defensive linemen, like quarterback situation. Like, what does it take to be good, and can Missouri do it?
It is way more complicated now, and there are way more moving parts now that have to align to be a good team. As you mentioned, 10 years ago, to be a good team, you had to build multiple good recruiting classes and then coach that team up to perform well on the field. Now it's that, plus dealing with the transfer portal and NIL, revenue sharing, whatever that looks like. We still don't really know what that's going to look like or how that's going to really affect things. So part of this answer is we don't know. But there's a lot more moving parts, which means there's a lot more you can screw up. There's a lot more things you can screw up, but there's also a lot more ways you can course correct if you do screw up. It requires a lot more ability to pivot, to be flexible from a coaching staff perspective, from a administrative perspective. You have to be willing to adjust and to change course depending on what the winds of change are coming. If it looks like your NIL is drying up for a year, okay, well, we got to really focus our efforts on development this year, or we need to hit the ground running more on the high school for the next couple of years because we're not sure we're going to bring in the same NIL dollars that we have been doing. Or you can see an influx in NIL money coming in and think, oh, this might be a window where we could go out and bring in a few high dollar transfers, kind of like what Ole Miss did this year, and really shoot the moon or try to shoot the moon. They fell short, and kind of maximize a small window. But then the next year have to pivot and do something else. So it's a lot of more moving parts, and it's the ability. I think it's almost, from a coaching staff perspective, the opposite ability. Instead of creating tradition and this is how we do things, you certainly want to have a positive culture, but in the past you've wanted to build this kind of moving machine that is steady and never changes. Now you have to be able to change every year. You have to be able to adjust, bring in guys, move guys out the door, or if you see that they're leaving, bring in new guys to replace them. So it's a completely different atmosphere than how it was.
So yeah, it is, and I prefaced it with that, but now I'm like, okay, let me just explain myself. When we headed into this year, we said Missouri had a very unique situation in that they had what was considered a very easy schedule. They had a lot of returning talent, and really all they needed to do was make some impact transfers and playoff, baby, right? That was the whole pitch. That was the whole thing that we talked about for 6, 7, 8 months. And then we get into it. And Missouri was not the only team that did this, by the way. Missouri was not one of one. There are a couple teams out there who were in a very similar situation, who had an opportunity. They viewed it as having an opportunity to make a run for a playoff and made big pushes in the transfer portal and considered to kind of like do really well. So I'm going to list them off here. I'm going to list off the guys who we're going to say won the transfer portal. Okay. Auburn is listed on there. Did Auburn have a good year? No, they did not. Now, part of that is that they threw all their money at skill position talent and forgot to get a quarterback. Also, Hugh Freeze, the game has passed them by. But, okay, Auburn was considered to have a great transfer portal class. Okay, they stunk. The next team that had a good transfer portal year was Colorado. Colorado's okay. Hey, they were making a run at the Big 12. They were in the Big 12 race until yesterday. Now, you could say that for 80% of the Big 12. But they have been ranked, and they are dark horses for the playoff. But they're probably not going to make it. But okay, that's one that's okay, but is not going to make it to the playoff. Miami, like Florida, Miami, the Hurricanes just lost to Syracuse last night. Seriously in doubt on whether they're going to make the playoff or not. But they had some big wins. They had some noticeable losses. So that's another team that made a big impact there. And then you have UCF. Well, UCF just lost their coach. He's going to quit UCF and go be a coordinator at Florida State. And then you have Missouri and you have Ole Miss. And Missouri's not going to make it to the playoff. And Ole Miss is probably not going to make it. So these are teams that saw an opportunity, made a huge push in the transfer portal. Everybody looked at it and said, holy cow, like they made all the right moves. They can set themselves up for this. And none are going to make the playoff. Maybe one. So now I'm thinking, okay, and this is the first year, right? So I don't want to overthink it. But what if high school recruiting still matters the most? Because it matters the most for offensive line and defensive line. That's where the game is won, and you still need homegrown talent, and you can supplement, but you cannot build. What if high school recruiting is still incredibly important, even though you're operating with fewer scholarships? And the teams that do that the best, regardless of how they do it in the portal, the teams that do that the best are the ones that consistently win 8, 9, 10 games and make it to the playoff. That is a rhetorical question, but I'm just thinking that after 1 year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the blue chip ratio, which is, meaning the percentage of your roster that has 4 and 5 stars on it, is still matters, because that's, no matter how many transfers you're bringing in, that's still going to be the majority of your roster, right? Teams aren't teams aren't going to turn over an 85-man roster, bring in 40 new guys and expect to
Colorado
compete.
did.
And over the course of a couple years, certainly.
Sure.
But and really, were they really actually? I mean, if they'd won the Big 12, they would have made the playoff. They wouldn't have actually competed in the playoff. They would have been, one and done. Would be my guess. But anyway, yes, 100%. High school recruiting is how you build the base. You're not going to reach heights without that base. I think we are learning more and more that transfer portals should be recruited for to get the two or three or four pieces that are finishing pieces to your roster. Look at Oregon. The vast majority of their roster, homegrown. They bring in a quarterback. They bring in one or two, I think, a running, one or two other skill position players, maybe a guy on the defensive line. That's it. They're the number one team in the country. They're the only ones that are undefeated this year. And they've recruited, had a high blue chip ratio for years. So they've built that base. Even before Dan Lanning got there, they were recruiting really well. Georgia, obviously, Texas, obviously, they brought in some transfers, but 90% of their roster are homegrown guys as well. So that's going to be the way to do it. But if you do Clemson, on the other hand, no transfers, good recruiting class, good homegrown high school recruiting classes. They've been in the top 10 for recruiting for years now. But they refuse to bring in guys from the outside, and they can't get over the hump, right? I think they finished 9-3 this year. They backed themselves into the ACC championship, so they may or may not make the playoff, but they're certainly not going to be a betting favorite to advance very far in the playoff. If they do, that's more the fact that the ACC is pretty awful, and that someone's got to come in from the ACC is why they even get a chance in the first place. So you have two different sides. Bring in a few pieces that will push you over the top. I think that's what it looks more and more like that's going to be the case, as opposed to bringing in 15 guys or 20 guys.
Sure.
That's probably, if you're having to do that, that means that your base roster wasn't strong enough in the first place, and the chances that that's going to be enough to push you over the top is pretty nil. It seems like at this point.
Yeah. You don't want to be Clemson. You don't want to be Colorado. You want to be healthy in between. So yeah, I mean, and then it comes down to NIL, right? Because it's like you gotta make sure you hold on to your guys. And Missouri's been very fortunate. Most of their guys, only one has been picked off by a blue blood. That was Dominic Lovett. There have been a lot of lateral transfers, what we consider laterals. Most of the Missouri's transfers go down. So, you want to make sure that your NIL, your funding, you're able to pay these guys enough to keep them interested and keep them staying, which seems to be a strength of Eli Drinkwitz and this staff. So, it's just, I don't know. I'm curious what success looks like going forward in a 12-team playoff, let alone a 14 or 16 if this expands again. So, which it will, but when and if. But yeah, I mean, these are things that I'm mulling around in my head now that the regular season is done, and you just see how these mega portal classes teams and how these non-portal teams do, and just trying to find the sweet spot and what to do. And of course, Missouri runs this schedule back next year. Now the non-con changes a little bit, but and then the home and away changes, but it's basically the same schedule. So does Missouri go and say, hey, you know what? No, we didn't make it this time, but we're a few pieces away from doing this next year. Is that their pitch, or is it, hey, we've got, we're not going to go, all chips in this year. We're going to take what we have. We're going to take some, obviously bring in a quarterback, do what we can, but we're not really going to make a huge push financially to bring in some splash transfers and make a run. I guess, do you anticipate them trying to make a playoff run next year with a financial effort, or do you see it more as we got a lot of money coming off the books this year. Let's reset and do what we can with what we got.
I mean, it really comes down to the people with the money and what they're going to do with their money. It's their money. So if they choose to, if they come to whoever is running the thing at this point and say, hey, look, I've got a few extra $100,000 here. Let's push this forward. They're not going to say no. All right. Because that money this isn't a salary cap in the NFL where you can save up some money and wait, and play for the future. And okay, we're not going to spend this $10 million this year. Next year, we're going to have an even bigger amount, and then we can really go out and get some big free agents, or however that may be. That's not how this works. So if the money's there, they're gonna spend it. Whether that's to keep anybody that's thinking about leaving that they really want to keep, or go in and you're not going to say no to a really talented transfer player that wants to come there, especially if you have the money to go and make a competitive offer for them. So it comes down to what the money is, and maybe the guys with the money get together and say, hey, let's take this money we've been giving to Luther, we've been giving to Brady, we've been giving to here and there. Let's hold on to it for a year. We'll let it gain a year of interest, and then and next year we'll hit it double hard, or if the right opportunity comes along, sure, we'll drop it this year, we'll spend it this year, but maybe we back off for a year or two, build it from the inside, and then come back in a couple of years when when the stars might be aligning again. Hard to say. I guarantee you that whatever the schedule will be in 2026, it's going to be tougher than the 2025 schedule. So the stars may not be, if they're not aligning next year, they may not align for another few years. That said, we've seen these teams go all in. We've seen Ole Miss go all in. We've seen Miami go all in, and it doesn't work if you haven't done the years and years of legwork ahead of time. So that's a long way of saying it depends on what they do, what they want to do, because Mizzou's not going to turn away money. They're not,
but you also don't want to exhaust your base.
Right. Maybe if you have Eli Drinkwitz has a conversation with a big name, with a big donor, and says, look, love your support. We need your support. This year is one that, that money that you could spend now, save it, and have that honest conversation, because then the next time around, it doesn't feel like you're just bleeding them dry. If they end up spending that money on a player that flops, or it just isn't as good as they had hoped, or was good but the team wasn't great, and then that kind of feels like they just lit the money on fire. These are all things that we don't know. We don't know, but you'd hope that there's a lot of good communication back and forth, and hey, this guy's going to really put us over the top. This is worth the investment, or hey, we don't really have the ends on anybody that's going to be a game changer in the portal this year. So let's, maybe take care of our guys that are in house, and sit on the rest for another year or two.
Yep. Love to know what those conversations are like. So clearly I'm not a booster that's donating, because I don't have those conversations, but I'd be very curious to hear how that goes, and how much influence and sway and shot calling goes on in those conversations. Anyway, Missouri beat Arkansas. I wouldn't want to forget that. We're not burying the lead. This is not a pretty game, but they still won. Arkansas has still never beaten Missouri in Columbia, which is very funny to me. We're still extending our winning streak. I think Arkansas has only beaten Missouri 4 times, and that's nice. That's very nice. I'm a big fan of that. So Sam Pittman seems to be keeping his job, so he'll be back. Next year we'll be going to Arkansas next year. Always tough place to play, and we'll see what happens to the streak then. But we don't have to worry about that right now, because that's 364 days away, and we still won. So that's very nice. But again, end of the regular season. It is conference championship week. It is signing day on Wednesday. The portal is opening up. Guys, we got to fix this schedule. We can't have portals and recruiting before you even get to your post. Okay. Whatever. That's a conversation for later.
Georgia had a quarterback who played in 10 of their games this year announced he was going into the portal today.
Yeah.
And they have an SEC championship game. On Saturday, in a week, or less than a week at this point.
And they're probably in the playoff.
Right, and they're almost guaranteed to be in the playoff. And they're losing a guy. I don't think he was a starter, but he played quite a bit for them. And he won't be the only one of the playoff teams that make the playoffs. He will not be the only player that leaves who does get significant playing time. So that's not great. That's not great. And I'm not quite sure why he couldn't have waited till later, but the portal windows are what they are. Maybe he just thought he needed to get in there when he did. Don't love it. Not great.
We can spend. I still think the regular season's great, and I love the playoff, but we can't spend the entire regular season talking about the playoff and then spend the entire playoff about portal losses. Like we can't. This is Target putting up its St. Patrick's Day decorations for Christmas. Like we're constantly like the next step ahead. But let's focus on where we're at. Let's focus on that. I like that. But yeah, that's a problem for somebody else and for conversation for another day, because guess what? That is the show for today. As always, we appreciate the downloads and the subscriptions. Leave a comment or rate us. We love all types of feedback from you all. You can follow us on Twitter at Matt and H.E. Edwards. He's at Burst to Hurst. Of course, you can follow the Rockin' flagship at Rockin' Nation, our podcasting outlet at Rockin' Radio. And if you mess around with Blue Sky, we're over there too. We appreciate you tuning in this time. We'll try to do better next time. And until then, MIZ.
COU.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.